everybody, and welcome to our first live Q&A session. Today, our Mistika expert, Adrian Gonzalez, will answer to all of your questions that you might have related to Mistika 10. Hi, Adrian. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine. Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Great. So the plan for today is that we'll first answer some of the questions that we received via email that you guys sent us. And in the meantime, you're welcome to place your questions in the Q&A panel. So we'll cover them after the first part of the questions. You can also upvote the questions. So if you see a question that you like, that somebody else posted, just make sure to give them a small thumbs up, and this will make the question go further up to be answered before the other ones. Okay, so just before we kick off, I recommend you to set your screen to the full screen resolution for a better viewing experience. All right, let's start. So as I said, we received some of the questions already through our email. And the first are related to basic VFX operations in Mistika. So as you know, Mistika Boutique offers a natively integrated VFX toolset. So the first question is the suggestion from Jeff Souza, actually, to highlight some of Adrian's favorite effects in Mistika.
All right, so let's jump to it. Okay, this as a first comment in this session, I'm going to show you, especially regarding with this kind of questions that are really open. My personal preferences are not, those preferences are not directly related with color grading. Sometimes other times are related with visual effects, a bit of compositing. So I think this session is good to show other areas that normally are not shown in Mistika presentation, because normally we focus quite a lot on color because it's the core of our technology. And sometimes we forget some areas that can be really interesting in a day-to-day workflow. So talking about visual effects, I use Mistika. Every operator in Mistika use the software in different ways. That's one of the great things in Mistika. So I'm going to show you here some effects and compositings, etc. That are not. I'm not saying that you have to do this kind of workflows in this way. It's just an option. It's just the way that I approach these kind of projects, and we are going to talk about a bit of some of experiments that I've done in Mistika as well that can be useful for a workflow. One of the effects that Jeff asked about it, and I'm going to go directly to it because it's really fast, is the debanding option. The debanding option in Mistika was improved, I think, a couple of versions ago, I think, or something like that. It's really recent and it's really, really nice because it works as well with HDR production. You may think that, for example, in HDR productions, you don't have banding because you're working at 16 bits. I mean, if the workflow is well built, you are working at least at 12 bits. But if you are working in ACES, etc., probably you're working at 16 bits. And the problem is that with some HDR monitor, you get banding. Even with that kind of information, with that color bit depth, you get banding. It's just in just specific situations, not always. But for example, in the skies, you normally get banding. Unfortunately, we cannot see the HDR banding here in a project because to see that banding, we need an HDR monitor, and we are making this streaming this session, so we cannot see it in live view. But I can show you how this works in 8-bit projects, and it's the same way for HDR. Okay, so let's jump directly to. I think this one is probably the clear one. So we have this. This is one of the small introductions that we have done for some of our tutorials, and as you can see, I compressed this video quite a lot to generate the banding. Here so we can see it better. I don't know if this can be seen for you guys. I'm going to open my my scope and make it bigger, but you can see there is some kind of like steps in the lines in here. Let me even make it even bigger. You see there is some kind of steps in there because of the compression we don't have all the information in this particular case, and at the end what we get is this kind of banding here. So the banding option is really simple. I'm going to load clean effect from here. It's in here. It's in the filter, the banding. Okay. And there is only two parameters. Why I cannot see anything? 1 second. Okay. Okay, I will use that one. Okay, so there we go. So we cannot, there are only two parameters. One is the radius and one is the bits. And this is the difference, differentiating point between Mystic and other softwares from the debanding option. Normally, the debanding are normally designed for working 8-bits projects or these kind of projects that are really compressed because it's where you normally have debanding. But if you go to Mystica here and increase this value, and to increase it in a fast way, you see that goes directly to 16 bits. The reason why it goes directly to 16 bits is because it works for images that are at 16 bits. And that's really nice because it's a really easy control. If you're working at some color depth, you can just go and select in which area are that kind of banding problem, and just with the bits isolate the area where you want to apply that fix and just remove it. So for example, in this particular case, I'm going to use the 8-bit option as my first starting option. I don't fix the issue here. So what I'm going to do is to decrease this value. Let's say that I select, for example, 6. And now this soft a little bit my selection. So basically, let me show the difference. Okay, so we have these like steps in the middle. When I apply the banding, you see that it's creating some kind of noise in the image. Let me just switch between it so you can see it. It's creating this kind of nice noise. And the great thing is if I, for example, put, well, one value works really well. If I zoom out, I still see a bit of banding. I can increase the radius of that noise by 2, and now it's completely soft. So now it works in the whole clip in a really nice way. And again, it's a really simple effect, but it works extremely well in all the situation. It doesn't affect the quality of the image at the end, especially if you are working in HDR. So that's a really nice option to remove the banding of any clip. In this case, for example, this is a simple H.264 material with the compressed banding problem, and just selecting in which bits you want to work to apply the radius of that noise, and it will be fixed. So really simple. Okay, so now talking about effects, I'm going to show you other timelines that I have in here. Like for example, the skin option there. There we go. I have many things in here. These are an experiment that I've been working on during the last days, and I normally like to work with the channels effect because it allows you to make quite a lot of things. So for example, in this channels effect, because I create a dummy clip, let me open it. Basically, it's a color grade, all right, that it has a small qualifier to select the skin tones, right? And then with a channels effect, I basically make an operation. I make a red minus blue, and then I combine both of them and the alpha of one and the other. In that way, what I get is a dummy clip that basically, for example, in these scenarios, when I apply that dummy clip or that filter, I basically get the skin tone selected automatically. I can just go, for example, to this shot, and same thing. And you can see it keeps all those details, etc., because it's not a pure key. It's a mixed operation between channels operation and key. And in that way, I can just isolate keys isolate the skins in a really cool way. For example, here, this is the shot. And if I go to the alpha, these are my selections. For example, in this particular case, it works as well really well. So we have this shot, go to my alpha, and automatically applies that that kind of selection that can be used later in color grade. So for example, for this particular case, I can just go to my grading. I'm going to remove it, sorry, and I can just go to merge key, and I'm using the source because the selection is in my alpha. So I'm bringing just my selection here in my color grade. I can just make it more obvious by lowering the key soft. I can blur my selection, and as you can see, it's extremely clean. So it's really nice to make these kind of selections of skins. Especially this works especially well in HDR material. Okay, I have to work a little bit in the HDR version because it changed a little bit because of the gamma curve, but it works really nice in SDR material. And from here, I can just make any kind of adjustment there. I'm going to push it a little bit so we can see it better. And there you go. So it keeps all the details, it keeps all the information, it's not creating any artifacts anywhere. So it's really, really simple to use in these kind of scenarios. Again, what I'm doing basically is, let me subtract these dummies for the a real image, because it's the same one. Okay, it's dummy 1 and dummy 1. So basically, I select here the skin, and then I subtract some information to only get the skin. I use the channel option. So if we go to here to the alpha, see, this is what an operation between red and blue. I'm just eliminating from the red channel the blue. So I'm getting this nice clean skin of combined. And then with the channel node, I combine both of them to get that information. So it's a really simple way, but again, the channels option allows you quite a lot of flexibility to create your own effects at the end. And this can be applied to any shot. As you can see, I'm just using the same shot on all of them, and I'm creating that kind of adjustment. Same thing for the channels with the high pass option. Jan Clear shows this option as well in his session. I have to check that filter, especially because I'm quite sure it's more efficient than this one that I created, but the philosophy at the end is the same. You can just load any image, for example, this one here. Let me load it. Okay, well, it's because I have it applied. Let me decrease the value. So the blur to 0. And wait, okay. Now I need to do this. Okay. So my original image is this one, and I have all those details here. And once I apply the color grade, I just increase the value here on the blur and recover that. I'm just creating some kind of soft clip or a high pass filter to create a beauty pass in here. How it's built is really simple as well. I'm going just to open it so you can see the group again. Again, it looks like very complicated. It's not really complicated. It's as simple as this. Basically, let me load one effect and replace the dummy with that effect. So we have one or the other. So the first step is to take, this is my original image, right? I create a Gaussian blur over it to create this kind of blur effect over the skin. And then I duplicate the same, my source image on top of it. And with a subtract effect, I basically create this kind of map of details, which is the map that I want to use to keep my details there when I apply the beauty pass. Then I use the same shot, this same combination with the blur, okay, with the blur. And of course, if I add both of them, which is basically this node, the add option at the end, all of those, the subtract is in here, the add is in there. Those are like presets of channels. So it's the same effect, but with these different parameters. So basically, the blur minus the source image creates my high pass. If I add the high pass with the blur image, it basically recover my original situation. So this is identical to the image that I have in the source path. The great thing is now, if I apply it over this Gaussian blur, a blur, I'm going to use the color grade just in case I need to make selections like key selections or shapes or whatever. I can just control the soft clip directly from here. So I'm going to put a really high value so we can just check it much better. So if you see that I'm applying, this is applying in all the areas, okay? So we probably need to, for example, create a shape and select the area where we want to apply that here. So for example, if we apply it here, sorry, we are applying the soft clip only in that area. So basically, using the color grade there in the middle allows us to use keys and to use selections with shapes, etc., but keeping the same philosophy. So again, this is again an operation between channels. It's not really common. I know that if you are colorist, just a colorist that you only use the color grade, that can look a bit scary at the beginning, but it's really flexible from the creative perspective. I always recommend to try it and play with it because you can get really nice results. Another effect that I really like is the enhance effect. And this is one of the most underrated effects in Mistika and allows quite a lot of great things. So for example, I have, again, this shot. Over this shot, I have applied my automatic skin detector effect. So now we have my skin detector effect applied. And then on top of it, I've just created a color grade, okay? So I've changed quite a lot of things. We can just see the things that I've just manipulated. So, well, basically a small color correction. As you can see in this here, I'm just using the shape, the skin tone, sorry, to select it. But I'm not using any qualifier. I'm using the one that I've created previously with my channels effect. And as you can see, it works really, really nice to control the skin tone. Is affecting this area here because it shares the same color. But if you, for example, apply a shape or whatever, you can isolate that area if you want. Then later I use a fixed vector to create some kind of, well, interesting change in color. And here is just a creative decision, okay? And then finally, we have this vector to change a little bit the color of the leaf in here and add a bit of contrast. Okay, so this is like my graded shot, and now I want to improve it. And to improve it, I normally use for this kind of short-term, close shots, I use the enhance effect. And the enhance effect basically adds a little bit, as you can see, of contrast over my image, but in a really nice way. This works, it's as well like the banding is really, really simple. You basically have a radius low and a radius high. Basically, you're telling, it's like delimiting an area where you want to add contrast. So you can create micro contrasts based on this, on this range. I'm using here from 0 to 30. If I decrease this value, for example, to 10, or well, maybe increase the value of the radius, and just to make it smaller, the range. There you go. Now nothing is affected by that contrast because it's the area that I'm selecting is out of that range. So I can just decrease it until I get something that is being affected. Maybe it's affected some area, nothing here. So maybe in 1, there you go. Now in 1, we are getting some micro contrast adjustment. So you can go as accurate as you want. So 1.5, and you will add micro contrast in only some areas. So I know that some of the changes are not visible in the streaming because they are like really, really small, but it works really, really well to enhance, for example, this kind of shots, or even landscape shot, and any kind of shot would work, but in my experience, it works especially well with skin tone shots, with close shots, when the character is really close to the camera. It works really nice to add this kind of interesting looking in contrast over the image. So those are some of the effects that can be used in Mistika. And as you can see, I'm just combining. That's the reason why I recommend to use the channels effect, etc., because I can just use that channels effect to select the skin tones, then the color grade, then the enhance. If over this I need to apply a beauty pass, I can just use my high pass here to create my beauty pass. So at the end, you can build your own effects to apply in on your stack and create a really, really nice effects. And the last one, and this one is really, really quick. I'm going to go to my demo timeline here, my visual effects. Well, this is a proper composition. That one is really that is more complicated, but one that works really well. I normally work. I do quite a lot of motion graphics and this kind of stuff for the marketing department of VGO at the end, and I like to use this kind of effects of optical motion blur and this kind of things that works really well in that kind of videos. We have a really nice optical motion blur effect in here. So basically, I've created this composition using Sapphire plugins as well. So basically, if we compare with the raw, with the source media, which is this one, I think, no, sorry, is that one. So this is the original one, okay, a very simple shot. That was a demo for NAB, but for compositing. But as you can see, it's a really simple shot. And with this shot, making trackings and using EXR multilayers, etc., we at the end get this compositing done, right? With this kind of signal that goes in there. But the problem is this movement, the movement of external elements, like for example, this signal here, doesn't have quite a lot of optical motion blur. I would like to add more to give more feeling of a speed or whatever, right? So I have the optical motion blur in there that creates that feeling automatically. Let me show you the difference. See? Automatically is creating that kind of feeling that is really, really nice when you are including in your shots external elements that need to follow a movement, or you want to add some blur during the movement, etc. It works extremely, extremely well. And as a final result, I get that shot with the optical motion blur applied here, as you can see, and it integrates really, really well with the shot. So that's an effect that is not going to be used in color. I understand that, but if you have like a quick shot that you need to apply some visual effects like this one, it works really, really, really nice. So those are like a really quick overview about these effects. I can share with you guys all of those filters that I built, just in case that you want to play with them. I don't have any issues with it. because I mean I just developed them for free. So I will we can just put it in our forums, and you can use it and try it with your own projects and tell me if they work right for you or not. Okay.
Great, thank you, Adrian. These are some really cool tricks, actually, and valuable insights on how you can actually combine VFX with color grading. And I think, yes, the idea of placing this to the forum is great. So we'll make sure to share the link afterwards. So the second question is also related to special effects. The question was if you can show us a sample workflow when performing a complicated chroma key.
All right. So I have the chroma here done. I'm going to go step by step. All right. I've made this overly complicated just to show the different options that you have. Okay. So basically, I have this shot. Let me see if it loads. Okay, this is an art result, and well, it looks like really simple, really nice. But if we go to the blue channel, we see that it's quite noisy. So the first thing I normally do with a noisy effects that needs to be in which I need to create a chroma is basically apply a denoise. I normally, if I have this kind of logarithmic looking, first thing is of course saturated because I need to create my chroma. Then apply the denoise so we can see the difference between one and the other. It's just a smooth denoise, just to clean a little bit that kind of noise that I have in there to make things simple for me. Then I normally use the green screen, which gives me quite a nice first selection. This is really simple to use. Just control with this control in here. You can just select the area that you want to limit using your pivots here to select the part that you want to isolate it. By default, because it's a green screen, it will detect the green screen. We have the blue screen as well in here, in case that you have a blue screen chroma. If it's red, which is less common, you need to use the color grade. But in both cases, you have a specific effects for that. And then it's where it comes, when I use the flexibility of Mistika for trying to improve it. So we have the show alpha effect, which basically moves the alpha to my RGB channel. The great thing of moving my alpha to the RGB channel is that now I can treat this like a normal RGB image with a color grade. So for example, with my color grade, I can use the primary to reduce, let me show you here. I don't know if it's visible when I'm going to make zoom. You see all that kind of dots and a small noise? Well, making a simple adjustment with the lift and the gamma and defining my pivots here that I now have in Mistika 10, I can just define those areas that I want just to remove from my selection. So basically those, with the color grade, I just clean my shot to get a better result. And then I combine my source media with my recently created matte selection. And now I have my source media with that alpha there. So now I can just make any grade in there or whatever. For example, one thing that I normally do is in those areas where I have this kind of glass problem that is tinted to green, I apply a secondary color grade just to go to the fixed vector and just decrease the saturation of green or move it to another color. Of course, here it's affecting other areas, like for example, this one, maybe with a shape, you can just isolate those areas that you don't want to affect and then apply it in the rest of the shot. So you can see how from green we move to something more more neutral. And then we can just combine. I have a really simple image there just to see the combination of both. So we can just combine both, and with the color grade, I can just grade again both of them. And as you can see, the glass is respecting quite well. The background is not tinted to green. So for example, if I move that layer up, for example, with position Y, there you go, is respecting the background colors in a nice way. And I have all the, for example, all the details here in the hair of the girl. Same thing here with the hair of the boy. You can tweak it as much as you want and try to refine it with blur alphas and this kind of tools. But this is a workflow. I normally create my selection in a quick way with a green screen, then move to the color grade to refine it, and then just another color grade if I need to desaturate some green areas that are still there.
Great. Thank you very much, Adrian. So now we're moving more into color management. So the next question is regarding unicolor in non-ACES workflows and how to deal with the lack of automatic tone mapping.
All right. Well, this one is really really fast. It's true we don't have a tone mapping in the unicolor. It's a pure technical transformation. If you ask me, if I'm honest, what I do is normally make the tone mapping manually. As simple as that. I just, for example, this is from Arri. I'm going just to this log C and white gamut in all my shots. So if we go back, let me see, it's loading now the storyboard. So once, oops, nope. So now I'm going to apply my unicolor and make the core transformation for this. So we go from log C and white gamut to, let's say that we go to 709 and gamma 2.4, just to select something really, really standard. Okay. Well, in this shot, it works really well. But for example, if we go to, let me propagate this to all the options. There we go. If we go to this one, we have these overexposed highlights. I normally, what I do is just use a unicolor color grading for that. So I use a color grade, take my highlights, and with the gain, I just recover with the gain or with the soft clip. Both options work well, depending on the amount of highlights that I have above my legal limits. So for example, here I can just recover those with the soft clip and put them on the range. And what I do once I have it, let me do this smaller so we can see the image. Once my image is there, or I can just tweak it to get maybe another result, something like that. Yeah. Once I like my own tone mapping, what I do is just propagate this to all my shots. So basically, I select, for example, all of them, apply the color grade, just select it, all propagate, and perform. So now all of them has the same adjustment, and it works nice. I mean, it's not a big problem, because my main goal with this adjustment is just to have everything in legal values, so I can see my shots in a nice way. At the end, I'm going to make the grading later, so it's not, I don't find this like a big issue for me. In any case, there's another option which is applying ACES ODT. Even if we are not working on ACES, we can always go to the ACES ODT, select here in the input the log C or the white gamut, and at the output the Rec 709, and it's just using the ACES color science instead of Mistika color science. Well, ACES color science is really good as well, so it's not a big deal. I mean, you are not in a really standard ACES workflow, but it's still valid, so you can use it. But again, in that situation, I normally use the unicolor and my own tone mapping.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So the next one is again for if you could give us some tips on working quickly to perform grade management.
Okay, so let me open this one. Okay. All right. I don't know if I have duplicated this shot. Yeah, I hope so. Well, okay. So when we talk about grading management in Mistika, we need to keep in mind that Mistika has a different time space compared with other softwares. Most of or a big part of the color of the grading management is done in the time space. So for example, in this particular case, I'm going to see if this one has replicated shots. I can just create, let's say that I'm going to make a grading like this. I'm going to apply color grades over all of them. So we have a more realistic situation. Let me make a quick contrast and saturation option. Okay, something like that. Okay, so we have this situation. I can just take this, or anything really, but take this, take everything, and just go to match and paste. And with all the options applied, this once you select those options are still there. So once you only need to do it once, and then replace them. So paste. Okay, there is no. Let me duplicate this one, so we can, in case that we have like different, the same shot in different positions in my timeline, this will make the adjustment automatically. So basically, color grade, same thing. Copy, just I'll be to paste it. Why? No, it should. Wait a second. Replace. Okay, instead of using all the options, I'm going just to use the match and paste. Sorry about that, guys. I'm going to check. Okay, just the match real name. That's the safer one because I'm using the internal name of the LNKs that are created by Mistika. So paste, and there you go. Okay, this will work. If you leave that, it will be much faster. So basically, you can just take all of it, copy, Alt-V, paste, and if the shot is repeated in your timeline, you will go much faster. I just selected this shot to show it, but I can just make the same thing. Just copy everything and paste everything, and it will do the same thing. So basically, of course, it's replacing the effects in the shots that are repeated. So this is a good way. See, here has been replaced again. This is a good way to copy things in a really fast way in the timeline when you need to copy something too many shots in just one go. Okay, if we are talking about copy shots shot by shot, we can just come to here, and for example, I can go to this shot, and we have a way to preview the result without applying it, which can speed up quite a lot our workflow. I can just press my mouse or my Wacom and just preview. If I don't like it, and just release it, and nothing happens. If I press and go up, I apply the color. So you can do the same thing with many shots. I can just make the same thing here. See, okay, it was working fine, and apply it. I'm going to connect with the next question because it's related. There's another way to move fast in the storyboard to bring some color corrections, which is the fact that, for example, let me put something like that. I can go to my storyboard and say lock offset. And this way, you can lock the offset between shots when navigating. So you can lock the offset, and then when I move the current, the other one is moved. So for example, I can just go to here and bring me that math color correction. By the way, I'm using the keyboard right now. With the panels, is much faster. With the keyboard, the end button will bring that the color correction to my shot. You can see all the shortcuts in here in the versions and bring effects management. So we have the end option. If you want to move the selection box, which is the red one, is Alt left or Alt right. So basically, you can move one or the other. For example, put it close to here and then keep that offset. And then, okay, I want to recover that color there, so I can recover it, or just move here and then move with my selector there and just press and I can just bring that color correction. So it's a really quick way to work with using the offset and using the key or well, the panel is even faster because it allows you to basically move with independent keys between the two boxes. It allows you even to move to the FX library here, which is not something possible with the keyboard, I think. So for example, if we go to the tangent mapper, in case that we are working with the panels, just to show you where is, for example, in the elements, I can just go to my element here, go to my bank 2, and we have pref library, next library. It's just really small in here. Sorry, I cannot make it bigger, but we have options as well to navigate through the FX presets through our library to bring things, and we have the library replaced just really close to here to bring those are my stills to my shot. And another way, for example, to compare things and make adjustment is when you move the selection here, you see that it's making automatically snapshots. This option can be enabled or disabled if you don't want it from here, which is the auto snapshot. So basically, every time that the selector box is moving, it's creating a snapshot. So for example, you can just keep that split, and when you move one or the other, sorry, let me go to here. Sorry, there we go. I can just move and make my own snapshots automatically to recover things or just to check and review, etc. So those are like a quick tips for managing our grading. And of course, the versions. I always recommend to use the versions. It's something that there are some cores that not use quite a lot, but I really, really like it, which is the fact that you can just come to this shot, make a version, make any change, another version. So basically, it allows you to make quite a lot of versions for your grading, and then select the one that you the one that you really want, and you can at the end propagate that one to the rest of your shots. So with one shot, I normally, for example, if I see that I have many shots that are really, really similar, I use like that shot like an experiment. So I starting to make looks of that shot. I save all of them as versions, and when I have one that I like, I propagate to the rest of the shots. And of course, we always have the gangs. with require a little bit of time. This we will improve that part in the future. It's one of the things that we're going to improve. But you can create a new gang and say, for example, exterior. Okay, and then you can just add the shots that are related with the exterior. Once you make some adjustment, I'm going to make something like really radical so we can see it. We go to the propagate, current gang, perform, and there you go. Now all my shots are have that kind of adjustment. And because it's a gang, I can use that gang with any shot or with any parameter really, which is really nice. So those are basically small tips that can be useful to improve the grading management during the project.
Great. And also, as you mentioned before, one of Mistica's cool features for this kind of management is also the copy paste for grades.
Yeah, it's the option that we explaining here. A copy paste with offset is just enable the lock offset here. I recommend as well to, by the way, to lock the hit B. It's interesting if you use the panels. But it can be a bit, if you are starting with Mistika, I always recommend it, because basically what it does is to put the head B with my selector box in here. So everything moves at the same time. Hit B can work like a third option to move between my selection box, my head B, my current shot. But at the beginning, it can be a bit complex, but it allows this kind of three-way navigation with the panels only.
Great. So the next question that we received was regarding the system requirements for Mistika Boutique. I believe the best way for every one of you is to review our article on support portal, where you have all the specifications written down. So I'll just paste you the link to the chat. Okay, there you go. But maybe Adrian, do you have any tips on, the hardware options and?
Yeah, with Mistika it's quite easy. GPU, everything works with GPU. So your main goal, your main hardware component in your system must be the GPU. Only if the CPU is important for encoding and decoding. So if you're using, for example, format like RED files, EXR, etc., the CPU is really useful for those situations. If you are using maybe, I don't know, ProRes or DPX, etc., you don't need an extremely powerful CPU, because those formats are more optimized, I think, for working with GPU. And the RAM option, of course, is much better to have great components for everything, but the RAM is especially important if you are working with really high resolution images. So if you are working normally in, I don't know, 2K up to 4K projects, you probably don't need so much RAM in your system. If you're working with VR projects and you're working in 8K, 16K, whatever, RAM is really important.
Great. Thank you very much for this insight tips too. So the next question is, what is the best way of grouping and organizing clips for smooth playback?
Well, to be honest, the grouping is not directly related with the smooth playback or not, is because at the end a group is like, I mean, if I put like several effects in here, I'm going just to put in a random way many effects, solid, blur, etc., and take everything and group. For Mistika, this is the same than reading everything like this. So basically, it doesn't make a difference. What I normally do, and especially in previous versions, with Mistika 10 we have improved that quite a lot, is in the previous version you always need to apply your divider effect on top of it, plus your framing to adapt your media to your project. Now you don't need it, because those effects are integrated in the shot. In this, well, this is not a raw file, so we don't have the raw parameters there, but we have the framing option, and it's automatically changing the resolution to project. In fact, because if I select it to input, you see that it's a bit bigger compared with the project. So those both effects were the traditional effects that I always grouped in previous versions, and just keep my timeline like this, clean, and my color grade on top of it. When I started to work once I started to work in compositing, I started to make my groups. But both those groups are a bit random in a way that it depends on the compositing, the composition. At the end, if I have like like a pieces of the stack. So for example, let me open. It's easy to see again with the demo VFX project. Here, for example, this group that I have in there is basically the whole stack in here. And probably here, as you can see, there are like a pieces instead of the Com3D. So I can just take this and make a group, and then take this and oops, I'm moving this, and make another group. So I can just take the different part of my stacks and make a group. The great thing of making groups in this case and related with the playback is the only connection that I can see at this point is that you can, for example, select the time warp here and enable the playback cache. So you know that the playback cache basically allows you to make like a pre-render of this. It will make a render to the internal format in Mistika, and you can use it for make playback at real time, especially in complex scenarios with really heavy shots. So the grouping here can be useful, for example, to make a group of this, and just to have in a quick way, you can just cache on, and you don't have a stack, so it's quite easy to see. Okay, I'm going to make playback of this group. This is especially important. The groups can be especially important for VR, because in VR you normally have like a multiple cameras in vertical. It's like let's put. I'm going just to make it something like that, like replicating. So let's say that we have like multiple cameras in vertical, and you have the VR stitch on top of them, taking all the cameras. So basically you are starting to have like quite a big stacks because of the camera plus the VR stitch. Then if you load the color grade or whatever. So normally when I'm working with VR, I have the stitch. The stitch by itself, I always group it to have just one clip in my time and space.